In the dim flicker of a Cimarron saloon, where the air hung heavy with whiskey and dread, Clay Allison stood alone, his hazel eyes cutting through the gloom like a blade. "They think to snare me," he muttered, voice low as a rattlesnake's hiss, his hand grazing the pistol at his hip. Axtel in his ring, weaving lies like a spider spins silk. But I'll not be caught, not by men who sell justice for coin. Outside, the wind howled across the New Mexico plain, carrying whispers of betrayal, as if the land itself knew the treachery brewing in the hearts of men who called themselves lords. The night lay heavy over Cimarron, a town carved from dust and blood, its adobe walls stained by the sins of the Santa Fe Ring. The Maxwell land grant, a vast empire of nearly 2 million acres, stretched from the shadowed peaks of Colorado to the parched valleys of Colfax County. Its title passed from Lucien Maxwell to foreign hands, men with soft palms and hard eyes, who saw the land as gold to be mined, not homes to be honored. The Ring, a cabal of lawyers and politicos led by Thomas Catron and Stephen Elkins, moved like vultures, their writs of eviction sharp as talons, seeking to drive settlers from earth they'd tilled since before the ink dried on the grant. Mexican families, white homesteaders, native kin, they stood defiant, their roots deeper than the Ring's greed, their hearts steeled against the law's betrayal. Clay Allison, his mind a fractured mirror from a childhood wound, had once tipped his hat to the Ring's power. But the murder of Reverend Franklin J. Tolby, a preacher whose tongue lashed their corruption, turned him. Tolby's body, found in a canyon with 2 bullets in his back, was no robber's work, but a silencing, a message from men who traded justice for wealth. Allison's blood ran hot, his loyalty now to the settlers, his pistol a judge where courts failed. In the St. James Hotel, he'd gunned down Francisco Grego, the Ring's lackey, the floorboards drinking his blood as lamps flickered out. Whispers spoke of Allison's war dance, naked and wild, a ribbon tied in mockery of death, though the truth wavered like heat over sand. Now Governor Samuel Axtel, a puppet strung by the Ring's gold, wove a darker plot. A telegram, its words honeyed with lies, promised his arrival in Cimarron to parley with the settlers. But the paper was a trap, a lure to draw Allison and his allies into a net of arrest or death. The wind carried the deceit, and Allison, standing in the saloon's shadow, felt it in his bones. "Trust is a fool's coin," he growled, his gaze fixed on the horizon where Fort Union soldiers waited, their rifles glimmering with the Ring's intent. The land itself seemed to moan, betrayed by those who swore to govern it, and Allison, a man of fire and scars, stood ready to meet their treachery with lead.
In the red dirt heart of Wayne County, Tennessee, where the earth clung to the boots like blood and the sky bore down with a preacher's wrath, Robert Clay Allison was born on September 2, 1841. The fourth of 8 surviving children to Jeremiah and Maria, he came into a world of Presbyterian rigor, his father a circuit rider whose voice thundered scripture across the hollows. The land was lean, its fields scratched from stone, and the Allison home stood austere, a plank house where prayers hung heavier than laughter. Young Clay, blue-eyed and dark-haired, bore the mark of a boy destined for neither peace nor oblivion, his fate sealed by a blow that cracked his skull before memory took root. Some spoke of a mule's hoof, its iron weight splitting his head like a melon. Others swore a horse through him, his temple meeting a rock in a cloud of dust. The truth lay buried, but the wound lingered, a fissure in his mind where reason bled into madness, his moods shifting like storm clouds, now quiet as a winter grave, now wild as a struck flint. The boy grew tall, 5'9", his frame wiry, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, but the wound shadowed him. At times he stood somber, staring at the horizon as if it whispered secrets. At others, a fury seized him, his hands trembling with a violence that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The townsfolk whispered of his fits, part epileptic, part maniacal, and his father's prayers could not mend what was broken. God tests the cracked vessel, Jeremiah would say, his voice heavy with hope. But Clay's heart answered to no sermon. The world was a raw and jagged place, and he met it with a defiance that burned like a fever. When the Civil War tore the nation asunder, Clay was 20, a farmer by trade but a warrior by blood. In October 1861, he rode to join the Tennessee Light Artillery, his blue eyes gleaming with a fractured light as he swore allegiance to the Confederacy. The war was a crucible, and he burned within it, riding under the shadow of Nathan Bedford Forrest, whose name was a curse to the Yankees. The campfires cast long shadows, the air thick with powder and sweat, and Clay moved among the men like a specter, his pistol a second heart. But the wound in his head betrayed him. 3 months in, his fits grew fierce, his mind a storm of visions and rage, and the surgeons took note. Incapable of duty, they wrote, their pens scratching like vultures' claws. A blow received years ago, producing a depression of the skull, brings paroxysms under excitement, part epileptic, part maniacal, with a disposition to suicide. In January 1862, they cast him out, his discharge a brand of shame, his hazel eyes burning with a fire no army could tame. He returned to Tennessee, a land scarred by war, its fields trampled, its people gaunt with hunger. The whispers followed, tales of Clay as a bushwhacker, a guerrilla striking from the shadows, his pistol barking at Yankee stragglers. One story, fragile as ash, told of him riding home to find a Union soldier harrying his mother, her cries answered by Clay's bullet, the man's body left to the crows. No paper bore witness, no grave marked the deed, but the tale clung to him like damp earth. Betrayal was the war's currency, and Clay learned its weight. Neighbors turned informers, brothers turned foes, and the Confederacy's cause bled out in the mud. By September 1862, he re-enlisted, his will unyielding, and served to the surrender in May 1865. Captured for 6 days, he stood among the defeated, his gaze fixed on a horizon that offered no mercy, then walked free, a man untethered, his soul a tangle of loyalty and wrath, and betrayal was never far behind. The war's end brought no peace. Tennessee was a wasteland of broken fences and burned homes, and Clay, restless as a caged wolf, heard whispers of the Ku Klux Klan, their white hoods a mockery of justice. Some said he joined them, rising to grand cyclops, leading night raids that left bodies swinging from oaks, their blood soaking the earth. Others claimed he spurned their savagery, his heart too wild for their organized hate. The truth was a shadow, slipping through the cracks of history, but the tales painted him as a man who danced with death, his pistol a judge where law faltered. "No man owns me," he would mutter, his voice low, his eyes scanned in the dark, as if betrayal waited in every corner. The land itself seemed to conspire against him, its people divided, its promises broken by men who swore oaths only to break them. By September 1866, Clay turned west, his siblings and their families trailing like a caravan of ghosts. Texas called, its plains vast and unforgiving, a land where a man could carve his name with lead. The Red River marked their crossing, and there, at its muddy banks, betrayal struck again. Zachary Colbert, a ferryman with greed in his eyes, demanded more coin than agreed, his words sharp as a blade. Clay's temper flared, a storm breaking in his skull, and their fists met like thunder, the river churning red. Some said he beat Colbert near to death, the man crawling free only by the water's mercy. Others swore Clay's knife ended it, their hands bound in a duel that left one man cold. The truth was lost, but the act was a spark, igniting the legend of a man who would not bend. In Texas, on the Brazos River, he herded cattle, his hands calloused, his name whispered in saloons, a man both protector and destroyer, his heart a crucible where loyalty warred with madness and betrayal was never far behind.
The Tennessee earth could not hold Clay Allison, its red dirt stained with the echoes of war and betrayal. His mind, cracked like a riverbed in drought, bore the scar of a childhood wound, his hazel eyes burning with a fire no preacher's prayer could douse. Cast out by the Confederacy, branded unfit for the madness that seized him, he walked free from their surrender, a man untethered, his heart a storm of loyalty and wrath. Whispers trailed him, tales of night raids, of a Yankee's blood spilled for his mother's honor, truths lost in the haze of a broken South. Now Texas called, its plains vast as a promise, treacherous as a snake's hiss. There on the Red River's muddy banks, a ferryman's greed would meet Allison's fist, a spark to kindle his legend. What violence awaits in that lawless land, where trust is a fool's coin and blood answers the seat? Join us next time to ride with Clay Allison into the fire of the Old West. Subscribe, hit the bell, and step into the dust for part 2. Adios.